find a dog. There was someone in Smithville a couple weeks ago that I did the same thing. If I hear it just hurts my heart because I've lost dogs like that. And so anyway, I probably did a sketch for them.
You did, and
I,
actually,
Oh,
I think they're your next door neighbors, and they also own your property, and they rent it from you. Is that not correct?
oh gosh, that was in Smithville.
In Smithville, did I say
Yeah,
Sergeant? I'm sorry.
yeah, but that just happened. So I'm
Yeah.
surprised word got around from there because I don't even
Well,
think my
honey, you
husband
live in,
knows.
we live in Rockport. Everything is, we don't have a newspaper. We have each other's mouths. That's all we've got.
That's amazing.
at
Gosh, I
least
wonder
it
who that
shows.
was. I wonder who
At,
that was.
at
Because I don't
least
even
it
think I told my
shows
It's the
husband.
people who
upfront.
own your property on Sargent that you may buy it from. It's them. You don't remember this?
Well, no. I do it a lot. I've done it before.
Okay.
So, but this just happened a couple weeks
Right.
ago in the people that own the property we're renting from in Smithville right now. They lost their dog. It was out in the with the coyotes all night long.
Right.
And I should send a picture because the picture she had of when she found him was amazing. This little dog was down a huge embankment beside a little creek, and it looked terrifying to me what the dog probably went through at night, but he was fine, and
Okay,
or
we're going to
she
get
was fine.
started now.
This just proves the point that control is an illusion. We have completely lost.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Okay, I am going to mute all. I did record, yes. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to make this larger. Okay. We have some prayers today. Like to have you pray for Amanda's partner, Elise. Her mother was supposed to have brain surgery tomorrow morning, but they did some final tests and her blood is not clotting. And so they're very concerned about that. So they have postponed brain surgery for a benign brain tumor that is growing very fast. And so please keep Elise and Amanda, and Anna is Elise's mother, in your prayers. And Finley, our granddaughter, as Amanda says, she knows something is going on. And I say, yes, kids do that. Also, in our prayers, lots of people for healing. Keep Laura, she's here today with us. Keep her in your prayers as she continues to heal with Bell's palsy. Cheryl's on the phone and was late, and I know she has not been feeling well at all, so keep her in your prayers. Our daughter is not doing well. Please keep Julie in our prayers. Cindy is waiting for some test results. Keep her in your prayers. Kelly, the weather got very bad in Canada. From what I understood, from what I could hear, I think she had to leave her home. It hasn't come back yet. And keep Kelly in our prayers.
She lives in Canada.
That alone.
Yep. No, but they've had some really harsh storms. God, we come to you together. We look for a lot of the same things, not always the same things divide us, but there's always you to connect us. We look for your wisdom. We look for your ways. We look to be one as we come to this, and these ones that we bring before you, you know our concerns. Don't let us forget. We say we'll pray for people. Keep those on our heart. These ones that we listed by name, you know how much people suffer. You know the uneasiness of waiting for test results, health concerns. We don't know how they come out. You do. Speak to our hearts. Remind us that you're with us on that journey. Keep your hand on Kelly as these storms displace so many people. God, we've had storms in our country that have killed people and their families that are hurting. If there's a way that we can be your hands and feet, show us. And as we study your word, we especially ask that you open our hearts to your message, that we can take those words and become better servants. Amen.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mentioned something about
Yeah.
that. We went to go see The Chosen last week. That theater assigned seats and we weren't all together, and I apologize for that. They moved it to a different theater, so everything got messed up. We're going again today to see the second parts. But Gene this week contacted me and said, do we want to talk about the movie and whether there are parts that we disagree with? And I want to honor that, but at the same time, I want to do it in the context of today's lesson, because the movies happen to be right at the same point that we are. But I want to mention one thing. If you go to see these movies, they do some things. The guy who makes them takes a lot of flack. I mean, he really gets hammered because there are things in the movies that are not, maybe sometimes not in the scriptures. And he's really, really good. He says these movies are not intended to be your primary reference for the Bible. They're movies. But he does stick to the message and the intent better than anything I've ever seen. I mean, he's really very, very good. There's one of the previous seasons where the disciple, the apostle Bartholomew, when he calls him, he says, I saw you sitting under a fig tree. And it was true. And that's one of the things that Bartholomew says, oh my gosh, how could he know that? Well, in the movie, they had a backstory to why he was sitting under the tree. He had a setback in his career, and it was disastrous. And he was out by himself. And that's how, actually, through that, Jesus reaches out to him. It's not in the scriptures. It's not in the scriptures. I don't want to tell you it's not in the scriptures. But it's good, I think, sometimes to make people be real people. These disciples that we read about are more than just a few verses. So did they make up that part of the story? Yeah. Does it change anything about what's going on? No. So it's a movie. And if you see them and that it offends you, that you go, hey, that's not in the scriptures. No, it's not. The guy doesn't hide that. But it is still very.
And he could not make sort of an interesting full movie if he didn't put some character.
I've never seen him destroy. But we're going to talk about at least one, possibly two of the other things in the movie in the context of today.
So what we're doing, this is week 2 and getting ready for Easter. And as we have talked about before and are emphasizing again this time, Jesus made a beeline to Jerusalem, and he was doing 2 things. He was preparing the disciples because they were going to be, or the apostles, they were going to be the ones that were going to spread the good news after he was crucified and was resurrected. And the second thing he was doing during this time is he was intentionally angering the powerful Jews, the leaders, so that they had no choice but to put him to death. Okay. With that, where do we leave off last time? We left off last time, and we're going to skip around from gospel to gospel. And you might want to talk about that for a second about the timing. But we left off at Luke 19, and Jesus was in Jericho. And Jericho, remember, Scott showed you a map that Jesus went down and on the other east side of Jordan, and then he started to cut across to get to Jerusalem. And Jericho is on that cut across part. Do you want to add something about the order?
Yeah, so within our Gospels, a lot of people like to talk about, they say there are discrepancies and there are inconsistencies in the Gospels. And I want to address that for a minute because it becomes sort of important, because I don't know, it seems like people want to be offended and angry these days, maybe more than I ever remember. Do any of you remember when we used to fill out resumes to try and get a job? Like before, employment.com or whatever, we did resumes. Do you remember there were different formats? You could do a chronological, you could do a functional, you could do these different things. Well, the functional resume is not chronological. It has to do with your functions. These four gospels, and that doesn't, by the way, that didn't offend anybody. I mean, if somebody does a functional resume and it's not chronological, we go, well, that makes sense for this particular use, for this type of job. That's what happens in the Gospels. The different people the four who recounted the gospel had different audiences, different priorities that they wanted to bring out, and they tell them in slightly different ways, and they're not totally chronological. When you're doing a topical coverage of something that happens much later might really be helpful under this topic. And so they bring things forward that didn't happen until much later. And we run into that a lot.
Especially in John.
Especially in John. He's very topical. But we run into a lot during this last week of his life. Some of these things are done differently, but they're still very consistent in the content and in the reason why they happened. And we're gonna run into that today. If you've been trying to read some of these things, one of the things that happens during this week, John recounts in John chapter 2, the second chapter. And it doesn't happen until the end. And it's not harmful. It's not an inconsistency. He's talking topically. So don't let that throw you off, either as we study or as we go to the movies to see these things.
Did you want to just say about the gentleman in 300 AD that wrote the?
Yeah, I probably should. So this attempt to try and harmonize the Gospels, to try and create a chronological single gospel out of the four, way back in like 300, there was a guy, he was a monk, Pacian, and he wants to write a harmonized gospel. So he's put in, he had access to some of they were very fresh manuscripts. He's got the best source material available. And he writes it's called the Diatessaron of Tatian. And he writes this chronological gospel out of the four. And it's pretty good reading. I mean, it's actually, but sometimes when you look at something purely chronologically, you miss some of the connections. And we're going to go into that today. So if this ever bothers you, I don't know, talk to me about it. But I'm telling you now, don't let it bother you, because there's nothing there to be bothered by.
So we're going to go to John 11, and we're going to talk about the death and resurrection of Lazarus. And this is only in the Gospel of John, this story. And right now, as Scott said, or as I said, Jesus had left Jericho and he went to Bethany. Bethany is about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. But this happened in the weeks prior to the last week of Jesus's life. Chapter 11, verse 1. At this time, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary, whose brother Lazarus was sick, was to anoint the Lord with perfume and wipe his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When Jesus heard this, he said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.
There's one place in the movie I might nitpick a little. The way they phrase it is that this is, they say this sickness will not result in death. The words that are used, that John uses, are really, really specific, and it says it's not going to end in death. I don't think it's worth nitpicking over, but the fact is Lazarus dies, as we're going to see.
Verse 5. Now Jesus...
Isn't there a question about the word death? is Jesus talking about earthly death, or is he talking about the?
In this case, it's earthly death, and he's going to deal real specifically. We're going to talk exactly about what he means when we say death.
Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So, on hearing that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea."
I want you to pay close attention to that. It says Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are siblings, right? 2 sisters and a brother. It says Jesus loved them. It shows that he's human as well as God incarnate. He has connections. He has people that are special to him, and these people are. And it's not a small thing. But also, right after it says he loved them, he got this message that says Lazarus is really sick. You need to come. Jesus loved them, so he stayed where he was for 2 days. And that so, one thing follows another. You know, I like hamburgers, so that's what I'm having for lunch, right? Because I like them. There's a because relationship. And because he loved them, he stayed where he was for 2 days. That doesn't seem to make sense, does it? It will. I promise you it will.
Verse 8, "Rabbi," they replied, "the Jews just tried to stone you, and you're going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? If anyone walks in the daytime, he will not stumble, because he sees by the light of this world. But if anyone walks at night, he will stumble, because he has no light." After he had said this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he is sleeping, he will get better." They thought that Jesus was talking about actual sleep, but he was speaking about the death of Lazarus. So Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. Let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, so that we may die with him."
So we've kind of covered this. He says after 2 days, let's go back to Judea. You know, get out of where. Well, they've come through there, and we've already talked about the fact that he said things that has enraged the powerful Jews, the Pharisees, Sadducees, the scribes, and they tried to stone him. And so he says, let's go back to Judea. His disciples are going, whoa, stop, hold it. They tried to kill you. Remember, we had this narrow escape. It wasn't really a narrow escape. They weren't going to be allowed to kill him at that time. But that's the way the disciples see it, is that you just narrowly escaped death. Surely we're not going to go back there. We talk a lot about faith, and Gene, you rightly bring it up often. But faith is a tricky thing. Do these people believe? Yes, they do. But you see their weakness as well. You see them worried that if we go back there, they're going to kill him. Well, if they believe he's really the Messiah, the one who's been prophesied, shouldn't they have an understanding that he's not going to get killed by a bunch of Pharisees going back? They should, and they don't. And you see it very strongly in them saying, we can't go back there. John Paul?
I think it's also that they aren't ready to see it.
Absolutely.
It's like they're part of things, and it's almost like, well, how can you not understand what you just saw? And it's because the understanding hasn't been given to them yet. They see it, but they don't understand it.
You're absolutely right. And remember, we said he has 2 big things he's doing on this last journey. One of them is to prepare the disciples, who become the apostles. But that's exactly right. They still have a ways to go. And this is part of that teaching. And so they're all worried about it. And he says this strange thing. He says that are there not 12 hours in a day? And he says, 12 hours of daylight. If anyone walks in the daytime, he won't stumble because he sees by the light of the world. And this seems non sequitur. This seems like a thing that, if you most people read things like this and go, I don't have a clue why you would just pop up and say that. And they just let it go, right? Who's the light of the world? Jesus is the light of the world. And John, in his gospel, makes repeated references to Jesus as being the light of the world, the light of men. This is important to John. That's why I tell you the gospels are different. Well, this idea of Jesus being the light is a theme with John. And so he remembers, it makes an impression on him when Jesus talks about walking in the light. He is doing what John Paul just said. They're not ready. And he says, you're worried about going back here. You're not walking in my light yet. You're not fully there. Just what John Paul got through saying. So he sees by the light. But if anyone walks at night, they will stumble because there is no night. And he's telling them, you're not walking by my light. They will, but at this point, they have these doubts. They're not fully there yet. Are any of us ever fully there? I don't know about you, not me.
How about the thing about Thomas at the end?
And then, but this is the last part.
Yeah.
Thomas does something that's beautiful. You can see that these, in fact, we're not there yet because it didn't cover the other part. He says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. Gene, you asked about what kind of death. He says he's fallen asleep. And the disciples, you see their fear. They're looking for an excuse not to go there. And they say, Lord, if he's asleep, he'll wake up. You don't need to go back to wake up a sleeping man, right? We don't want to go there. And you can, every time I read this, I can just hear the sigh in Jesus' voice, right? He says, if he's sleeping, he'll get better. They thought that Jesus was talking about actual sleep, but he was speaking about the death of Lazarus. So Jesus told them plainly, and this also happens a lot, that Jesus speaks in parables, he speaks in ways. This is a classic teaching technique with Jewish rabbis, is they want to make the disciple think for himself or herself. At that time, mostly himself, but they want to make the disciple think for himself. And so they start by saying things, and then they come out and speak plainly. And Jesus spoke plainly. He says, Lazarus is dead. Yeah, he said sleep. Lazarus is dead. And we're going to find out more about that. But here he says this funny thing, for your sake, and remember it's these 12 that are talking to him, for your sake, I'm glad. How can you be glad that your friend is dead?
And that you weren't there.
And that you weren't there. And he says, for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there so that you may believe. John Paul, that's what you were saying. He is bringing them along. And what he says is, you're going to see something that will reinforce your belief, that will reinforce your faith. So it's going to work out. God works all things together for good. It's going to work out. And you actually, by the time we're done, I think we'll understand this was always meant to be. So then comes Thomas. These guys still don't want to go. You know they don't. You know Thomas is one of them. They think, okay, bad idea. But Thomas says to his fellow disciples, let us also go so that we may die with him. What does that say? He thinks they're going to die, but they're not leaving him. Now, is that faith? To me, it's beautiful faith. Because even though he has doubts, I'm going to do what you tell me to do, right? Even if it means death. So at the same time that they don't understand that there's no way these people are going to be allowed to kill him, he has the faith, he has the strength, the conviction to say, let's go with him, even if it means us dying also. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
And this is This is the doubting Thomas we're talking about.
I was gonna say, and this is doubting Thomas. So this is the story. I think what we've done to so many of our biblical characters is try to make them perfect. And, we just left the Abraham, and it was like, there are stories of Abraham, and you say, wow, that's the best of Abraham. He believed. And the next thing, he's telling people that his wife is his sister. And we say, not his proudest moment. Faith, I think the faith and belief is a journey.
And it's not to justify the times when our faith is weak or our faith fails, but
Yeah.
don't say I'm not worthy and walk away. Yes? That's the thing, is that happens to people. They get so ashamed and it's an excuse to walk away. Notice also that Thomas, not only is he doubting Thomas, it refers to him as Didymus. And we know what that word means. It means a twin. The die is two. But he's a twin, and we don't know anything about his twin. We don't know anything about the other one. But there it is.
Verse 17.
And I think you hear Peter, where else can we go? Where else are we going? You're here, and I think that your faith statement is, as far as Thomas understands, I'm going to die with you.
Yes.
And I think he believes that to the point of death. So that is a faith he can't give anymore at this point. And that's pretty good knocking on the door.
I assume that most of you have been through similar things. I can tell you from experience, there are times where you get called to do something. I have, and people even say, why are you doing that? I don't know. Just do it. The thing I always tell you, growing up in Texas, we have these weird sayings, and one of them is, never mind if the horse goes blind, just load the wagon, right? Your job right now is not to question it, just do it. And sometimes, and that's sort of the point in this, we are supposed to learn from these things, and we're supposed to see. And there are times where we say, I don't know, but I'm convinced you're telling me to do it, just do it. We'll find out later.
Verse 17. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already spent 4 days in the tomb. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, a little less than 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them in the loss of their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha replied, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she answered. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world. After Martha had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside to tell her, the teacher is here and he's asking for you. And when Mary heard this, she got up and quickly went with him.
I'm going to move through this a little quicker because the second part of this today is personally important to me and I want you to hear it. But Mary comes to him. Martha stays back at the house. People mourn in the Middle East. And there's a bunch of people there mourning, but she hears that Jesus is near, and she goes to him. The first words out of her mouth is, Master, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Sounds like she's getting told? Yes, it does. She's voicing her disappointment.
Never do that.
Okay, yeah. Have we ever done that? If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And she says, nevertheless, I know that even now, God will do what you ask. Now, what is she saying? She can only be saying one thing. She's saying, I think you can bring him back. But she also isn't really sure. And she doesn't know whether to be bold enough to ask. This is one of those things we see ourselves in. I know you, even now, God will do what you ask. But I'm not going to be bold enough to suggest it. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. And she says, yeah, I know. At the end, at the resurrection, I know. But I'm hurting now. I know that's later. I'm hurting right now. And he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Now, there are people who love to tell, like the Da Vinci Code and stuff, they tell you that Jesus himself never thought that he was divine. He never, this is a very popular thing. Gene just gave me this look like surely no one says that. It is a very popular thing in modern culture, modern teaching, and even in churches now, denominations. He never believed it. It didn't happen until the Nicene Council, whenever 360 or whatever that was, that they decided to tell a story that way. He declares himself. He absolutely many times says, "This is who I am. I am the resurrection and the life. And they, those who believe on me will not die. Do you believe this?" And she says, "Yeah, I believe it. I believe that you are the Christ who was to come. You are the Messiah who was to come and now have come by extension." That sounds an awful lot like Peter when Jesus says, "Who do men say that I am?" And he says, "Now who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of God." She's expressing the same thing. And he says, "Good, let's go find your sister." All right. He knows what's about to happen. And let's move through it. Let's see if we can get through the rest of this.
Now Jesus, had not yet entered the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were in the house consoling Mary saw how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary came to Jesus and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died."
Let's pause for just a second. Here we are again. If you had just been here, my brother wouldn't have died. They're voicing disappointment. People get angry with God at times. He seems to tolerate us voicing our disappointment, like it or not.
When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they answered. Jesus wept.
The shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept, except I always tell you there are no verses in the Bible. Those numbers got added after the fact, but it is a very short sentence. It's 2 words. Jesus wept. Now, a lot of people, you would take the position, well, he wept because of the death of his friend. But if you read very carefully, he sees the mourning of Mary and Martha and the other people around there, and he's troubled in his spirit. They're hurting, but he still wept out of compassion. We're often told Jesus saw the people and had compassion on them, and that's what this is. He is also human, and you see that part of it. We have a high priest who understands us, we're told. So he weeps, and then they take him to the tomb.
Then the Jews said, see how he loved him." But some of them asked, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept Lazarus from dying?"
Let's stop right there real quick because I want to make one quick mention of this. Jesus wept. And there are people who see this and they go, "Look, see how much he loved Lazarus." But there are other people who say, "Oh, what? He's supposed to be such a big deal. He could make blind men see, but he don't even show up for his own friend. What's wrong with this guy?" It doesn't matter what he does. They're gonna bash him. You see how that works. Do we see that today? We see that today. You decide you don't like somebody, it doesn't matter what they do. We're going to say something nasty about him. So if he heals him, then they complain because maybe he's using the power of Satan. If he doesn't heal him, look, he's supposed to love his friend so much. He doesn't even come to, he could have healed him and he doesn't. Yeah, that's today.
Verse 38. Jesus, once again, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," Jesus said. "Lord, by now he stinks," said Martha, the sister of the dead man. It has already been 4 days.
Let's stop right there. Several things pop out of this. One of them, it tells us he's been dead 4 days. He's been in the tomb 4 days. Strangely, if you start doing the math on this, you realize that the 2-day delay wouldn't have changed a thing. This guy's been dead 4 days. There's reasons for that. I will spend all the time on the math. But the fact is, he's been dead long enough that nobody's going to be able to say, well, he wasn't really dead. He was in a coma. He was this, he was that. He's been dead 4 days and he started to smell. This guy's really dead. This is not a Monty Python skit. He's dead. The 2 days delay actually has a purpose. Yeah. So, but the other thing you see is she's already said, Lord, even now, I think God will do what you ask. But then she says, ooh, don't open the thing up. He's been in there 4 days. He stinks. Now, we ask for things and often don't pause to think, what would that look like if God really did this for you? This is a great example. You're talking about a guy who already is starting to decay and smell. When she was saying, I know you can do anything, you can see she was saying, I think you could raise him. But then when it comes to the reality of it, it doesn't seem so practical anymore, right? I see people do that all the time. I've been guilty of it. I had a little bit of a discrepancy with a minister because the denomination had gone completely crazy. And I was confronting him with some of these things, and he's being very defensive. And I realized for him to change at this point would mean leaving the denomination, leaving the church, leaving his pension. You know, do I say, God, please open his eyes, please change his heart? I don't know. What would the reality of that look like? Be careful what you ask for. This is one of those cases. Martha says, I think you could heal him. But then when faced with the reality, she's like, oh, I hadn't thought about this. If he really does it, he's going to come out all rotty. And I mean, it's a weird thing, but this is what's going on.
Jesus replied, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus lifted his eyes upward and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I say this for the benefit of the people standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. After Jesus had said this, he called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had been dead came out with his hands and his feet bound in strips of linen and his face wrapped in a cloth. Unwrap him and let him go, Jesus told them.
Make this last part real quick. I mean, strangely, there's so much packed into this. The idea of saying Lazarus come out, almost anticlimax. I mean, he just has that authority and he does it. And it happens. He does say a prayer beforehand, though, to God the Father. He says, I know that you have heard me. I know that you've always heard me. He says, but I say this for their benefit. Remember other times where Jesus does things and they go, he's doing that by the power of Satan. Well, they're not going to be able to say that here, are they? He makes a point that they understand he's doing this and declaring that God the Father is the one doing it and has heard him. That's the point in saying, I'm saying this for their benefit, not for mine.
Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had come to Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin and said, what are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation.
See what's important to the leaders. You see what he's been fighting. Some of the people see Lazarus raised and believe. Some of them go and report straight back to the Jewish leadership. They see it as a bad thing. And you see what they say, if people see this, everyone's going to believe. If word of this gets around, it's going to believe. And the Romans, they're going to say this is the Messiah. And the Romans will be threatened by this new king. And they'll come in and take away our place and our nation. What's important to them is their positions of power. And we'll lose that. And I've said this before, understand I don't just make these things up. They don't want a Messiah if it means they're not the ones in charge. If a Messiah comes, we won't be the top of the hill anymore. And they literally don't want it because they'll lose their station. Now, if they could be the first lieutenants, maybe, but you see what's important, and they have heard that a man has been raised from the dead, and it's not a good thing. How weird is that? How strange is that? They're very upset by what should be a marvelous thing. If you don't see lessons about the society we lived in and that, you're not looking very close.
But one of them, called Caiaphas, who was a high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." Caiaphas did not say this on his own. Instead, as high priest that year, he was prophesying that Jesus would die for the nation, and not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to gather them together into one. So from that day on, they plotted to kill him.
Let's start with the last verse. From that day on, they plotted to kill him. They've sort of experimented with discrediting him. Have him arrested, put him up and let everybody see, look, this is the good guy you're trying to follow. And he's not really the Messiah. He's just a guy because, look, we can arrest him. From that day, they plotted to kill him. There's what we've been telling you, that one of the things he does is push things to the point that they're going to kill him. He makes certain that they're going to kill him. And there it is in black and white. This is the first thing that really cements that. Caiaphas, I'll briefly mention, Caiaphas says it's better that one man should die, which means we're going to kill him, than for the whole nation to perish. And it says that Caiaphas prophesied. Now he is more corrupt than you can imagine, and we could do a whole class on how corrupt the priesthood is and the high priest is. But God speaks prophecy through him. Do you think that's odd? Well, when the temple got rebuilt after we got hauled off to Babylon, he used Cyrus, a pagan king, to rebuild the temple. Yes, God uses people who don't believe in him. Yes, he does. He uses them for his purpose at times. And in this case, we're told, John tells us, this is a prophecy that Jesus will die not only for the nation of Israel, but for the others that God will gather together and join into one. And that's going to be important for the next thing we talk about.
So if we go chronologically, we're going to skip now to back to Luke 19. And this is called the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. This story, or this recollection, is told in all four Gospels, but we're going to read it in Luke. Verse 28. After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he sent out two of his disciples, saying, "Go into the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks, 'Why are you untying it?' tell him the Lord needs it." So those who were sent out and found it, just as Jesus had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owners asked, "Why are you untying the colt?" "The Lord needs it," they answered. Then they led the colt to Jesus, threw their cloaks over it, and put Jesus on it. As he rode along, the people spread their cloaks on the ground. And as he approached the descent from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of disciples began to praise God joyfully in a loud voice for all the miracles they had seen. "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." But some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." "I tell you," he answered, "if they remain silent, the very stones will cry out."
So quickly, there's a prophecy, and it talks about Messiah coming, riding on a colt, the foal of a donkey, young donkey, right? It's a prophecy. And he sends two disciples, says, go to a house, there's gonna be a young donkey sitting there that nobody's ever ridden, just bring it. And if they ask why, just say the Lord needs it. They do it and they just let them take it. I'm sure word has gotten around about Jesus, but this is fulfilling prophecy. And then when he gets there, the people begin to throw their cloaks on the road, and they begin to lay down the palm fronds. This is a way historically to greet a king that arrives. They are declaring, but not just that. They're speaking, they're chanting some verses from Psalms.
Psalm 118.
Psalm 118 that are absolutely Messiah prophecies. And they are declaring him Messiah. And the Jews hear it, and they know what this is. They understand what the people are saying. And they say, hey, stop this. Don't let them do that. They're saying you're the Messiah. And Jesus says, sorry, guys, if I were to shut them down, the very stones would cry out. Cry out what? That I'm the Messiah. Never let anybody tell you that he didn't believe he was divine. He did. And this is as plain as it gets. Now, this is him declaring himself, and this just further cements the fact they feel like they have to kill him. You see how this develops, that he is saying things boldly that they simply cannot tolerate. Let's move on.
Okay, this is the second thing we really want to touch base with today is the cleansing of the temple. And this
Can I
is,
speak real quick about that? In the movie, just real briefly, in The Chosen, there's a scene. We most have heard about Jesus cleansing the temple, turning over the tables and everything. And it has offended lots and lots of people. Lots and lots of people, because it portrays Jesus in a way that they don't like to think about. It is,
Jesus.
Me Jesus, they think. Oh, we don't want to hear that. I'm just going to tell you point blank, it is incredibly accurate. There's a scene in there where there's a woman trying to drive a cart through the temple court, and he gets angry and he says, turn around, you're not bringing goods through here. And she says, yeah, I'm going to. He says, no, turn around. It's in the Gospels, boys and girls. Sorry, people don't like that this happens in the movie. It happens in the Gospels. If you don't like it, close the book. That's what it says. So let's talk about what goes on. And if you've seen the movie, you're going to understand there are people mad about things that are in the scriptures.
So the cleansing of the temple is in all four Gospels. And this is one of the things that in John, it's in John too. So it's not in order. But we're going to talk about it in three Gospels and an Old Testament verse if we can do this.
We're out of time.
No. We're
Well,
okay.
we don't have enough to do this.
Should I start? Okay. I'm on Luke 19, verse 45. Then Jesus entered the temple courts and began to drive out those who were selling there. He declared to them, it is written, my house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. Jesus was teaching at the
Oh,
temple.
no, that's all.
Oh, that's all, sorry.
He says he drives the people. That's all we get from Luke. He drives the people out. My father's house is a house of prayer. You've made it a den of robbers. But let's go to the other Gospels. I want you to see that stuff that's in the movie is in here.
Mark 11, verse 15 through 18. When they arrived in Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began to drive out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those selling doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. Then Jesus began teaching them, and he declared, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers.
You see that line again. My house, is it not written? He's quoting Old Testament scripture, which we'll talk about. It'll be a house of prayer for all people, but you've made it a den of robbers. But notice, here's the verse where it says, he wouldn't let people bring their merchandise through the temple courts. It's in the movie. People are angry about it because it makes Jesus look angry. He has a right to do it, but it's in the scriptures.
Now, John's account, John 2, verse 13 through 16, excuse me. When the Jewish Passover was near, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and money changers seated at their tables. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those selling doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a marketplace?"
In the movie, Jesus fashions a whip out of cords, and people are mad about that. How dare you show Jesus with a whip in his hand? I'm sorry, it's in the Gospels. He sees this going on, he fashions a whip out of cords, probably leather. I mean, that's how they would have done it. And he drives them out, plain and simple. Now, real quickly, the high priest, the temple, when people come for Passover, they spend foreign money. And they won't let them spend foreign money to buy lambs. They won't let them they make them change it into the local currency, and they take a cut. 1 million people possibly in Jerusalem, and like Visa, they get a cut off of every transaction. Yeah? They make a lot of money off of it. Some of it they have to fork over to Rome, so Rome takes a dim view. But this is so corrupt, they are stealing from the people. People will bring their own lamb for the sacrifice, and they have a pin up in the front, and they inspect them. And they'll say, oh, that lamb is not clean enough. That lamb's not spotless enough. You're going to need to buy one of our lambs over here at an exorbitant price. And then they take that lamb and clean it up and sell it to the next poor sap who comes through. This is beyond a racket, and it's going on in the temple court. He has a right to be angry. But let's focus on the words he keeps saying. My Father's house is to be a house of prayer. This is really important to me, and I hope I can get you to hear it, because it's not in the movie and it's not in the Gospels. But what he's quoting is Isaiah, right? And it is one of my favorite things in the Bible. And it's one of my favorite things in Isaiah. Isaiah is a prophet who has the chutzpah to say, thus saith the Lord. He is speaking words directly from God. And you'll hear me quote this several times a year. You want to read it? Isaiah 56?
Isaiah 56, starting in verse 3. Let no foreigner who has joined himself to the Lord say, the Lord will utterly exclude me from his people. And let the eunuch not say, I am but a dry tree. For this is what the Lord says to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbath, who choose what pleases me, and hold fast to my covenant. I will give them in my house and within my walls a memorial and a name, better than that of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will not be cut off. And the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord, and to be his servants, all who keep the Sabbath without profaning it, and who hold fast to my covenant, I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. Thus declares the Lord God.
That's good enough. You see that line? There it is in Isaiah. My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. And you see Jesus quoting it, but that's all we get. These people would have known where it comes from. And they're threatened by Isaiah. There are parts of Isaiah they don't like to read. And this is one of them. What the Jews have done is say, we're special, we're God's people, and God doesn't like any of the rest of you, right? You're left out. Eunuchs serve in the palace, but they're cut off from the people. They will never have children. They will never have a lineage. They're not just second class, they're animals. And the foreigners who come, we may let them sell us some stuff, but you're not one of us. God will not take your sacrifices. You can't sacrifice. So in other words, you have no chance for redemption through Yahweh, only us. This is what the Jews have done. And Isaiah is saying, thus says the Lord, Let no foreigner say, I'm going to be cut off from God. Let no eunuch say, I'm just a dry twig. God says to the eunuch, I will give you a name better than sons and daughters, right? Later down it says, your sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar. Now, do you see what's going on? This is Passover. There are sacrifices being made. It's only the Jews. They will let the Gentiles, as they showed in the movie, we'll let you kill some animals, but not on our altar. It doesn't really count. We're not going to stop you from saying Yahweh is good, but you're not really one of us, and you aren't really being forgiven. The sacrifices, they have cut people off. And Jesus is quoting that when he turns over the tables, when he says, you're selling sacrifices, he goes back to this. The outer part of the temple court where this is going on, Gentiles are allowed. The inner part of the temple court where the sacrifices go, there's a sign up above. They show it in the Chosen. Most people don't know, they don't notice that it's there. But there's a sign that literally says, if a foreigner goes through this doorway, your death is in your own hands or on your own head. We're going to kill you. You're not allowed into the place where the forgiveness happens. Jesus is here to give the sacrifice, and it's for all people. Do you see the connection now? What's really going on? And when he turns over the tables, you people have turned the sacrifice into a business. And you've excluded people, and he says he'll gather together not just the nation, but the other people and make them one. This is really, really important stuff going on. And the idea of him, yes, he's angry at them turning it into a business, but it's more than just that. And what he's overturning is this whole system, this whole setup they created, where they're saying God doesn't care about any of the rest of you, only us. They're here, they were intended to be the lineage through which Messiah comes. A couple of weeks ago, remember, he tells the woman at the well that salvation comes from the Jews or through the Jews. That's him. So there are a whole bunch of things being brought together. That line in Isaiah, where he says that the foreigners are not going to be left out, that the eunuchs are going to get a name better. It's really important because that's us. That's how we're included. That line in Isaiah where he says, you know, you're part of this, and my house will be a house of prayer for all people, or all the nations. It's unambiguous. It's not just for the Jews. It's for us. That's what's going on when he drives these people out of the temple court, these changers. It says that he drove out the animals. They sell sacrifices for money. And in the movie, it portrays him doing that, and there are people who are all upset because he's being cruel to animals. He's not being cruel to animals. He is saying, you're not going to be selling the sacrifice anymore. And he actually lets them go, and it's not being cruel. And they get upset because he fashions a whip out of cords, and he drives out the money changers. Yeah, well, he has a right to do that. But there's more going on. And the last piece of this is the high priest, his sons, and everybody else gets a cut out of this. If you want to talk about something that will make people angry enough to kill you, take their money away. When we start out saying that this last portion of the Gospels, he is enraging them to the point that they will absolutely kill him. This, if it wasn't already cemented, this cements it. And what's the last part of what it says? They actually issue instructions that if anybody has any knowledge of his whereabouts, they're required to report back to them. They are going to kill him. And make no mistake, the high priests have ordered assassinations. numerous times. One high priest had his own mother killed and his brother who was high priest killed so that he could take over as high priest. When I say they're corrupt, you literally probably can't imagine how corrupt. But there was a point where there was one school, one rabbinic school teaching something that they didn't like. They aren't legally allowed to assassinate them, to execute them, but they still hired people and they went out and killed them. And they just said, oh, gee, we didn't know anything about it. It is very, very well documented. So what you see in the movie is what happened in real life, except it didn't go far enough, because if it did, it would be a 4-hour movie. But this whole session is about setting right and making preparation for his sacrifice, and it supplants everything that's been going on. That's why he's turning over the tables.
And we're past time. One of the things, I was, raised in the church. I was very Catholic, 12 years of Catholic school. And one of the things that this study is making me even more aware of, we as Catholics we always heard the Jews killed Jesus. And, it's two different groups. It's the Jewish leaders that killed Jesus. I always wondered, how could 4 days before they sentenced him to death, how could they be putting, their cloaks and palm branches on the grounds? They weren't the same people.
We'll get to that next week. There's Lower Jerusalem, there's Upper Jerusalem. It isn't the same people. That also gets taught. Last thing, because I told you this is so important to me, going to go back to the end of Isaiah 56. Now that we've gone through it, the last 2 verses of Isaiah 56. Would you like to read them? You want me to? I got it. All right. This is Isaiah saying, "Thus declares the Lord, who gathers the dispersed of Israel." The Lord who gathers Israel together, I will gather to them still others besides those already gathered. This is in the context of everything you've read, or we read out of Isaiah. It's not just the Jews that he gathers together. I will gather together still others. That's us. Unless any of you are, Jewish, that's us, right? That's what he's quoting. That's what he's about to do in just a few days. God, I'm thankful for the message. I'm thankful for the fact that we have it. For the fact that it says that we're part of your plan and always were. I'm grateful for a time set aside to learn these things. And, we worry about being able to explain it in a way that conveys the depth of your love for us. Remind us of that week. We're going into this time where we observe Easter, where we commemorate and remember. Then let us make the most of that. Keep these things on our minds, that you, at great expense, included us, gathered us to you. And help us to look for ways to be worthy of that gift. Amen.
Thank you, guys. I feel like we've talked really fast.
We had to.
Sorry. Have a great week. And if you have some time, go see the movies. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good week.